Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gooey's Dungeon Dive, the podcast where I, Gooey, rank all of the dungeons in the Legend of Zelda series, and this week in Oracle of Seasons we discover where the Temple of Seasons ended up after it sank into the ground. By following a mysterious girl, we find the temple resting in the land of Subrosia, a strange, hellish world where people love to dance. We are able to recover from the temple the Rod of Seasons, which allows us to control the seasons in Holodrum, though currently we only have the blessing of the Spirit of Winter. This allows us to impersonate Santa Claus, very poorly at least, as well as travel to our next destination, Snake's Remains. While not as close of a resemblance to the shape, the map of this dungeon sort of continues our trend of referencing the original Legend of Zelda. Of course, that game had level 4, the snake, and I would say that this one resembles a snake even more, I suppose. And I guess that's thematic enough too, due to the fact that one of the main enemies encountered are the snake-like ropes, which were also a key enemy in level 2 in the original Legend of Zelda. So, level 2, dungeon 2 here, makes sense. And similarly to Gnarled Root, this dungeon does give off a lot of Zelda 1 vibes, but maybe with some even more distinct elements. But hey, there's even a few rooms with some simple but kind of cute block pushing puzzles, so if that's not Zelda 1, I don't know what is. Navigationally, it is larger than Gnarled Root, but not really much more complex, maybe fractionally. It's definitely fitting as a step beyond Gnarled Root in that regard. It does have a few key standout elements in the realm of navigation and gameplay though. One small factor is it has a pretty classic section where you exit the dungeon and enter it from another location. Like some other dungeons we've seen before, it's very basic and doesn't really make the dungeon too much more complex, but it's always neat when this happens. The other feature introduced here is this weird sort of rotating platform thing. By stepping on it, it rotates us 90 degrees in one direction, but after using it, it will now go in the other direction when stepped onto. This is not really that difficult here in this dungeon, not that complex, but it gives you a chance to learn about it, and like the mine carts, it will return later and create some more complex navigational puzzles later in the game. Since the last dungeon item was the Ember Seeds, I was kind of surprised to see bombs play more of a role in this dungeon. I guess they also were acquired in the last dungeon. There are a few noteworthy moments where bombs come into play, including one kind of annoying room that gives you a key. They even get some use against a returning Link's Awakening boss, now mini-boss, Facade. Nice to see you again, bud. As well as the final boss, which we'll get to in a minute. Because not only do we have the bombs, but of course there's a dungeon item here, and it is the Power Bracelet, which obviously gives us the ability to lift heavier objects. I did think that they really tried to come up with something more unique though than just lifting things. There are some slightly memorable sections where you have to push these heavy rolling cylinders and move quickly beyond them as they roll back into place. It's pretty basic, but I actually have fun doing that, and it will come into play more in the game. Both the bombs and the Power Bracelet though combine and come into play when taking on the final boss, Dadango. Once again, you gotta appreciate the Zelda 1 reference. This fight shares a lot of similarities to all of the Dadangos of the past, but of course, you gotta bomb that Dadango. It adds a little section to it though where he gets all puffy and funny looking when he's been bombed, and he has to be lifted and thrown onto the spikes at the center of the room, and it's about as straightforward as all the other Dadango battles, but I like his design, and the added element of like lifting the big guy and throwing him on the spikes makes him an alright boss to me. It's okay. After our victory against Dadango, we can retrieve the next essence of nature, the Gift of Time. Seeds sprout as seasons change with the Gift of Time. And there you have it. This is a nice little dungeon. Again, it's not totally stand out in terms of memorable like vibe or anything like that, but gameplay wise, I think it's a lot of fun, if not a little basic. Like I said, step up. It's got that same classic, get a key, find a lock, or get a few keys, and what lock do you go to, and then you get the item that has gates you a few times, and you get, the boss key is also a thing you gotta find. So it's got that kind of classic navigation I love. I think it really is comparable to Gnarled Root, so I'll probably, if I got the ranking up, it's gonna go around there, I think, somewhere. But I guess one thing I should mention, I didn't really know where to mention it in the first video or the second video, but it's worth noting, I guess, that this has, the dungeons in this game, unlike Link's Awakening, have scrolling rooms. So while looking at the map, it's still got the kind of grid-like formulation of the rooms. They're now larger, so that can create some more, you know, distinct in-room puzzles. It definitely allows for a little bit more going on. So it's worth pointing that out, but otherwise we're seeing a lot of these classic Zelda concepts just being iterated on. So anyway, I like this more than Gnarled Root Dungeon. So already I'm gonna say it's above that. It really is like, it really just feels like they turned the dial up a little bit, which isn't a bad thing. It's a good progression, but you know, we're just starting from a kind of low point. But that's, I mean, we're in the area of early dungeons, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. It definitely, I mean, it doesn't have the vibe of like Icona Castle, for example. But I'm wondering if I could be convinced yet to put this above. And I'm thinking maybe. I think I maybe could go. You know what? No, not yet. Not yet. I feel like this is still establishing the basics of the game. It's not a sophomore slump, which is nice, but I'm actually honestly looking on it, it's like maybe better than Woodfall, but it's definitely, I like Desert Palace more, actually, I would say. So I'm just gonna slot this in right above Gnarled Root, which is kind of a very, like, that's what the dungeon is doing, is it's like I said, it turned up the dial a little bit, but it's not like reshaping the game or like it presenting something like totally bold and new. So yeah, I don't know, right above it, and we'll see. I'm really hoping that, I remember later on in this game I become more impressed with the dungeons, so you know, we're establishing the groundwork, similar to, like, if you look how I have the Link to the Past dungeons, very close early on, and then I'm hoping for a big leap forward later. So yeah, that's where I'm gonna keep it. I'm excited to keep going. Thanks to everyone for joining me along on this season, and I'll see you next week.